Hello, my name's Lauren, and in this video I'm going to tell you how I went from being housebound with agoraphobia, panic disorder, panic attacks, to being somebody who works, travels, goes out every day, a mum of two kids, and just doesn't really feel held back in any way by panic disorder or panic attacks or anxiety. I'm not going to ramble too much in this video, but I just want to start with a little bit of context just so you know where I was coming from. I got diagnosed with panic disorder and agoraphobia in my early 20s. I was about 22, 23, I want to say. And the reason I got diagnosed was because for the probably about 12 to 18 months prior to that, I'd been suffering from panic attacks, but I didn't know they were panic attacks. All I knew was that every time I seemed to go out, every time I was in the car, every time I was on my way to work, every time I was like in a shopping center or just anywhere really out of the house, I would have these weird physical attacks where it was like my body would shut down and I would urgently feel that I needed to go to the bathroom. I would feel shaky and weird and just like my body felt like it wasn't my own. I thought it was a physical condition. I thought there was something physically happening to me. I thought it was kind of a gut issue because of how often it made me feel like I needed to go to the bathroom and gave me digestive disturbances and that kind of thing. So I kept going to the doctor and kept saying like, something's happening to me, what's wrong with me? I keep getting these stomach cramps, I keep getting diarrhea, I keep getting like out of breath and just feel really weird. And I had lots of tests done, like things like colonoscopies, blood tests, like looking for something physical. And every test kept coming back and saying that I was physically fine. And so I was so confused. But during this time, the attacks kept getting worse. I found that I was having them more often, they were lasting more, and I felt more incapable of going about my daily life in the way that I had been, say 6 months prior. I was suddenly unable to go out and see friends. I was calling in sick to work a lot. I didn't feel right, and it was just getting worse and worse. And then it finally reached a peak and on an overseas holiday, and that's really not that important. But basically, during the holiday, I kept having these attacks over and over and over and over. I was crying all the time, just felt awful. And then when I landed back in Melbourne, I was at my wit's end of wondering what was happening to me and why was every test coming back saying that there was nothing wrong when, I felt the worst I'd ever felt in my life. And that was when I was diagnosed with agoraphobia, with panic disorder, with anxiety and depression as well. On the one hand, I was very confused and very upset because I didn't understand where this had come from. Like, how had I suddenly started suffering from agoraphobia or whatever that was? How had I suddenly started having panic attacks out of nowhere? So the doctor told me that I could start taking medication, I could start going to therapy, kind of like all the, probably if you're someone who's been diagnosed with agoraphobia and panic disorder, you will have been through this as well, so you'll know the medical side of things. They seem very confident that it's like, okay, well, go on these drugs and go do this therapy and, then we'll get you sorted out. So that was kind of how I left the doctor's office. And then I came home and I Googled, as you do, I Googled everything I could about agoraphobia, about panic disorder, about panic attacks, and everything I read made me terrified. It seemed like people just didn't get better from this. Or if there were people who did, they were like the exception. Maybe it was just that whole negativity bias thing in that I only focused on the horror stories rather than the positive ones. Those were the ones I paid the most attention to, but it seemed just like it wasn't going to be something that would be straightforward to overcome. And that really freaked me out. But I was kind of half convinced that I could do it. And so the next day I went to a shopping centre with my mum, and we got about halfway there before I had to tell her to turn the car around because I could not go any further. I just couldn't. And I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to agoraphobia specifically, is that you want so badly to be able to go out. You kind of know that you're going to have to get out of the house in order to get out of the house, but You feel like you just can't. And it's like the times that you try to get out of the house, your body just doesn't cooperate, your mind doesn't cooperate. And the best way that you can explain it to people who haven't been through it is like, imagine if somebody was dangling you off a cliff and was telling you not to be afraid. It's like if your whole body is reacting in that way, that you're basically being dangled off a cliff and you're in imminent danger, it's very, very hard, if not, I want to say it feels impossible to go against that. And that's for good reason. That's because when your body is under threat, when it feels like your survival is threatened, whether that's your mental or physical survival, it's going to react in the strongest possible way to get you to not do the thing that it thinks is going to hurt you. So in a way, like, it's a great thing that our bodies are designed that way, but when it comes to agoraphobia, it feels like you're just fucked, because how do you go out and do the thing to overcome agoraphobia if you can't go out? You know, it feels like the cruelest irony. And so that was where I got stuck for quite a while. I had kind of like two parts of me. I had one part who was convinced that if I just found the right medication, if I just found the right therapy, if I just figured out the trick, then I could beat it. And then I had the other part of me who just felt completely and utterly defeated, and just didn't know what to do, and didn't understand also why it was so impossible. Like, why did it seem so hard, and why did no one have a straight answer on how you could stop being agoraphobic? And I went through this stage of, I guess, trying to convince that part of me that it was doable. And so I was on the hunt. I read all the books, I read about all the therapies, I Googled every night, I watched all the videos. Like, I just was searching everywhere for a way to cure myself. And I became really obsessed with the idea that the cure was out there and I just needed to find it. I kind of went through a stage of switching medications and like researching the best medications, and I would spend hours on drug websites reading the reviews from people and, you know, reading specifically how that drug helped with anxiety. And then I would convince myself that that was the drug I needed and that was what was going to help me. But then I would read all the bad reviews about it and how someone said, you know, it gave me diarrhea, or it made me made me put on heaps of weight, and just all these things that I thought, oh my God, no, actually I can't cope with that. It just seemed like every possible avenue that I thought I might go down had some kind of roadblock. Even things like programs online that, you know, left you convinced that if you signed up to this program, you could beat anxiety and you could, you know, beat panic attacks forever and come away from it anxiety free. Those programs were quite expensive, and for someone who had stopped working because I couldn't leave the house, I didn't know how I was going to be able to pay for that. It seemed so hard to fix myself, and I felt so uncomfortable with that. The other thing that I really wanted to touch on is how you can look around yourself when you have agoraphobia, when you have panic disorder, and you look at the way other people are living their lives, and all of it feels so alien to you. For example, my friends at the time, they were all sort of going around traveling, backpacking, doing those kind of things, going to festivals, you know, just doing lots of fun stuff, I guess. And I just couldn't fathom how that was possible. Like, how would that ever be possible for me? Because, you know, everything had become so hard. Even leaving the house to go down to the mailbox, or walking, like going outside, going for a walk, walking to like a couple of houses down, like even that was just so difficult. And I would look around me at the way everyone else was living their lives, and I couldn't ever imagine how I would be able to go about that. It kind of leaked through to me when I was reading stories of people who recovered. They would say things like, one day I just packed my bags and I just went on a trip. I think there was one book in particular that I remember that said that they just they just went out one day. They just went, they said, I'm doing it, that's it, I've had enough. And they went on like a big road trip. And I would read that and think, how? Okay, I understand that that's what cured them, but how? None of it seemed to make sense to me. I should point out as well the things that I tried in that time, because there was quite a few. So it was, read a lot of books, did CBT therapy, did just regular talk therapy. I went to one session of hypnotherapy, which honestly was like helpful in the sense that it motivated me, but I don't think I was like under, I guess you'd call it, because during that whole session I was focusing so much on how badly I needed to pee and how you can't just get up and leave the room in a hypnosis session, because then the guy would know that I'm not really concentrating on what he's saying, and it just like, I remember feeling like I just need to get out of this appointment so I can go pee. But yeah, so that was helpful, but I did only go to one session because it was also hideously expensive and not something that I could afford to consistently do. Yeah, I tried a bunch of different medications. I'm not going to name the ones that I tried because partly I don't remember, and also partly I just think medication is such a individual thing, and I don't think it's necessarily what helps anyway, so I don't think it's worth talking about too much. What else did I try? I think I downloaded like a couple of programs. I did the DARE program. I did the Linden method. I'm sure there's others. Yeah, I did all of those, and look, they helped to a degree in the same way as the hypnosis. Like, it all inspired me and motivated me, and I would sit at home listening to these tapes or reading the material and just feeling like yes, like I know there's nothing to be afraid of. I know the panic attack is not going to kill me. I know that I can get outside. Like, I just got to push through. I've just got to float through. I've just got to, diffuse and whatever the programmer told me to do. I was like, I'm going to do that. But then the next morning would come and I would try and go and do the thing, and I would just be overcome by that other part of me who felt defeated again. And just because it was so hard, like, it didn't seem to matter how much I understood that I was ultimately safe, or how much I understood that a panic attack wasn't going to kill me. To be honest, I wasn't afraid of dying anyway. I was mostly afraid of humiliating myself, having like a bowel or bladder accident, and just, someone seeing me shit my pants in public. I was terrified that I was in some way going to embarrass myself. So telling myself like a panic attack isn't going to kill you, I didn't give a fuck. Like, I was like, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried that a panic attack is going to give me uncontrollable diarrhea, which they often did. So it wasn't like I could then tell myself, a panic attack isn't going to do that, because sometimes it did do that. It was like I could talk myself around it as much as I wanted, but when it came down to the wire and I had to actually go out and face my panic, it was too hard to go by what I knew in my head to be true, because my body was doing something different entirely. My body was reacting in the way that made me so afraid. My body was telling me, like, you need to go to the bathroom right now. You need to leave right now, because, you've got stomach cramps. Like, you need to go to the toilet. You can't, like, test that theory of, well, let's just see if that's what actually happens. Because what if it does happen and that's your worst fear come true? Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it all seemed so insurmountable, and I never wanted to challenge the panic, because putting yourself in a situation where you might humiliate yourself, or you might lose control of your body. I know for a lot of people, and for me sometimes, the fear of panic has been, what if I lose control? What if I go crazy? What if I have to go to hospital and all this happens? And that's not something that you want to challenge. Or what if I get in the car and I have a car accident? What if I have a heart attack? What if I, just whatever it is. It's never something that you feel equipped enough to challenge, because you're like, I don't want to bring on that possibility. I don't want to test the theory in case it actually does happen and then I'm fucked. So then came the breakdown.
I feel like my life is a waste.
I became really depressed and really withdrawn, and I felt like I was starting to lose it a bit as well. Like I started to get quite strong feelings of not wanting to be here anymore, feelings of like I don't know what to do anymore.
I just feel like, why the fuck am I alive? I'm not living. I'm just here every day.
But also not wanting to give up, but being terrified of the way my brain was, you know, pushing me towards that option, and then also just feeling crazy, to put it bluntly, like feeling crazy, feeling like I could feel the anxiety in my skin, feeling like I was like crawling out of myself, and so frustrated that I couldn't get people to understand how awful I felt and how hard everything had become. Honestly, it was the best possible thing that could have happened, even though it was also the most hideous thing that happened. I ended up speaking to a helpline. I was pregnant at the time with my first daughter, and so I spoke to a perinatal depression hotline, told them how I was feeling like giving up, how I felt hopeless, how I felt, like I didn't want to be here anymore. They ended up getting a crisis team from the hospital involved, and it was kind of like I felt like I'd been slowly imploding for quite a while, but suddenly it was like everyone else knew that it was happening as well. Like I couldn't keep pretending that even though I was agoraphobic and I was stuck at home and I was just sort of going about my day and living my life and hopefully eventually one day getting better, I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't just keep living that way, and I think I needed to sound the alarm so that everyone else knew, like, shit, she doesn't have anything left to give. Like, this is bad. I needed that for myself. I needed to admit that things were not okay and that I was not okay. I needed to stop trying to find a way to fix myself and trying to find a way to cure myself, because what ended up happening was that I finally fucking realized that looking for a way to fix myself that involved finding something outside of myself wasn't going to be the way that I was going to get better. So what I finally ended up doing, which is what helped the most, is that I just started going outside for walks. And I know this is going to sound like that thing where I say that guy just got in the car and went for a big road trip and that's how he cured himself. It's like, how did you do that? The way that I got outside was that I would pack up my newborn daughter's pram. I would wait until the time in the day where I felt the most capable, like where I'd already been to the bathroom 10 times. I would wrap a sweater around my waist in case I had an accident and humiliated myself. I would pack all the things that I thought I might need on the trip when I was only going like 2 minutes away from the house. I would literally put her in the pram and I would walk outside, and we would go down the street and we would go for these tiny little walks, like genuinely 2 minutes away, 3 minutes away, 4 minutes away. And it wasn't like something that I was measuring. I wasn't saying, okay, on Tuesday I'm going to go this far, on Wednesday I'm going to go this far. It was just like, okay, today I feel okay and I'm going to go outside of the house for a couple of steps until I don't feel okay, and then I'm going to come straight home. And so that was what I did for a while. I would just get out for these little walks, and I kind of had it in my head that I wanted to get a little bit further each time. But of course, some days, something would happen and I wouldn't feel capable of it. Like I'd run home straight away. Some days I would feel this like a gurgling sensation in my stomach and think, oh my God, something bad's gonna happen, run home. It was this getting out for walks that started to shift things. And it was only years later that I realized it wasn't just the fact that I was, finally getting out of the house, but I think it was the fact that I was changing my environment, because I had been stuck inside for so long. And the thing is, when you're in the same environment, you feel the same way about things. Everything looks the same, you do the same stuff. you know, it's like every day is just like a rinse and repeat version of the day before that, and the day before that, and the day before that. And it's so hard to stop thinking the same things because you're constantly seeing the same things and doing the same things. So when I actually got outside and started changing my own environment, and sometimes, you know, a neighbor would be walking out as well and I would see them, and so I was seeing different faces. I was, you know, out in the weather, genuinely being in a different environment besides the four walls of my house started to make a difference in the way that I was thinking, and I started to feel a little bit more capable. And I think slowly that side of me that I said felt really defeated started to actually feel hopeful, because it was like things are changing. I'm not doing the same thing every day and expecting a different result. You know, I'm not just sitting at home Googling how to get better. I'm actually outside looking at different things, seeing different people, doing something that makes me feel like I'm actually making a difference to my situation and my circumstances. When I started to think different thoughts, like finally thinking a different way, it became easier to actually want to go out and do other things as well. So there is a shopping centre close by to me. It's like a 5-minute drive, 7-minute drive maybe, and a gym as well, the same distance. And I started wanting to go to those places. And so I would say, you know, maybe tomorrow I'll do it. And then maybe tomorrow would come and I wouldn't do it. But then one day I would like go for a walk and I would get further than I'd gotten in, you know, ages. And I would be like on such a high that I would want to go and challenge myself. And so I'd try and drive there. And the times that I did make it there, I felt so accomplished and on such a high. It started to like build this momentum of being able to get out of the house and being able to kind of bend the edges of my comfort zone in a way that felt terrifying but also felt quite exciting. And so I think the thing that people most often want to know is, how long did it take you? Like, how quickly did you go from being completely housebound to being able to travel and stuff? And I feel bad, because for me, it took me a few years, but the reason for that is because I took it so slowly. I was a new mum at the time, as I said, and so I was navigating being a mum for the first time at the same time as doing exposure. And so in a way that was good, because it kind of meant all my attention wasn't on me, it was on someone else, which was honestly a good thing. In a way it was also bad, because it was like I went really easy, and maybe if it was under different circumstances, I would have possibly gone a little bit quicker in the way that I challenged my exposure, but maybe not, who knows. But yeah, so it took me, I'm gonna say, about 1.5 to 2 years of really doing this stuff in earnest. But like I said, doing it slowly, just doing really like small things in my local community, but doing things that scared me, like going to mothers groups and going to the library and actually having a conversation with someone. This was all stuff that was terrifying, but I kind of got to a stage where I was actually going out every day, even if it was to somewhere, you know, that's only a couple of minutes away. I got in the habit of doing that every single day, like actually getting out of the house. And my baby got in the habit of it as well. So by the time she started being able to talk, not her first word, but one of her first words was shops. And so once I'd mastered that, and once I was getting out every single day with regularity, even if it was just to somewhere smaller, I started talking about it more. So for ages, I hadn't really been talking about what was going on with me. I'd just been kind of trying to overcome it silently. Not tell anyone about it, because I felt really weird and strange. And you know, it kind of wasn't the done thing to tell people like, hey, I'm housebound and I can't leave the house, and I panic. So when people said like, how have you been? I'm like, yeah, good, just a bit sick. Maybe that's an Australian thing, I don't know. Yeah, so I started actually talking about what was going on with me. I started making blog posts about trying to get out of the house, and you know, the anxiety that came along with that, and the social anxiety that came along with that. And I just started being more open about the things that I was experiencing. Then other people not only started to chime in with like what was happening with them and like say, I've actually experienced panic attacks too. I started to have this feeling that I wasn't such a weirdo and that I was connected to everyone around me. And then I also started to feel kind of obligated to keep going out. Like, now that I'd started talking about that I was doing it, and I started posting about it on Instagram and started connecting with other people around the world who had agoraphobia, I felt like I had this obligation to them to keep testing the boundaries and to keep going out. And so sometimes when I would be out in my car and I would be panicking, I would think about like how I really wanted to tell those people that I'd managed to go to where I wanted to go. And it would give me that extra like, let's do it. Yes, this feels awful, but let's do it. I feel so sick. And so I would make it there and then I would post about it, and it was so exciting to be able to say like I did this and to be able to connect with other people who found that so exciting as well and knew what a big deal it was. Like, for example, the first time I got on public transport and posted about it, everyone that I was, in like an Instagram community with were like, yes, that's so exciting. And so connecting with other people was definitely one of the game changers for me. Being open about what I was going through was one of the game changers for me. Instead of just brushing it off all the time and saying like, oh, I'm just like sick or, whatever's going on. Like, I always used to make excuses for why I couldn't do things without saying the real reason that I couldn't do it or that I was scared to do it. And I always thought that it was such a huge source of shame that I couldn't, I couldn't just say like, no, I couldn't say I was anxious. I couldn't say I was panicking. I couldn't say I had agoraphobia. That was so shameful. But once I started saying it, I wondered why I hadn't just said it in the first place. Like, it connected me so much more to other people. I began to develop such a deeper sense of relationship with other people, which in turn helped with my agoraphobia. And it was weird that I was like, I spent so long trying to avoid the elephant in the room. But once I finally started talking about the elephant in the room, I realized that it wasn't such a big fucking deal, which was a huge relief. That was kind of the turning point where I started being able to do more and more and more. And so from then, I started accepting invitations to go to things. So, for example, a friend's wedding, to go away for Christmas on like a little road trip. My sister's like, when are you going to come visit? And I kept saying, I can't, I'm agoraphobic. And then I was finally like, I am actually going to come and visit. And I did those things. And the difference was that I didn't say no out of fear of like what might happen. I would say yes, and then I would say I will deal with the fallback of that later. So I would say yes to things and I would commit to something, and 9 times out of 10 I would follow through. There were times, of course, when I couldn't go for whatever reason, or the anxiety got too much and I just had to say, look, I would love to come but I can't. I tried, can't get there. But yeah, 9 times out of 10 I found that I was actually able to go out and do the things that I didn't think I was going to be able to do again. It was funny because I remember after, a year or so of being able to do those things and getting on a plane and going on a road trip, I realized that it didn't look the way that I thought it was going to look. I thought that one day I would be cured and I would feel finally like a normal person again. The honest truth is I didn't feel that way. I still panicked. I still had pretty extreme anxiety. I still worried a lot. But on the flip side of that, I gained such a greater understanding of myself and I became more comfortable with who I was. I became more honest. I became more open. I became a more authentic version of me because of that. And I also became more resilient in other ways because I was so used to navigating my way through a panic attack, and I was so used to feeling a lot of anxiety and having to do something while feeling a lot of anxiety. I started to being able to, like, this sounds silly, but like tap into this inner resource of like, I know that I'm a lot stronger than I give myself credit for. I know that I can get through really hard things, even if they feel really hard. Which prior to that, it was kind of like, when things got hard, I would just shut down and I would be like, no, abandon ship. I can't do that. My first overseas trip was probably the biggest thing. So I'd kind of done like these little things, and then I just suddenly did an 8-hour international flight from Melbourne to Hong Kong, which was like pretty baller, I want to say. Went to Hong Kong for a week. We went to Hong Kong Disneyland. We switched hotels halfway through the trip. So we went from staying in Hong Kong City to staying at the Disneyland hotel. So a fair bit of traveling in between. I did that all after, only a few months after having taken my first 40-minute flight. So I kind of like dropped myself into the deep end. After I realized that I really could do the scary things, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do the really scary things. So yeah, that one was probably the most exciting thing that I did in terms of recovery from agoraphobia, because I was still very much at that time mostly functional, but sometimes holding myself back because my anxiety was too overwhelming, and I thought, but what if this happens? What if that happens? What if I humiliate myself? What if? And feeling very closed in by those ideas. But yeah, when I went to Hong Kong, when I did that flight, it was like, even if I have a morning where I don't feel well, I'm just gonna have to go out and do things, even if I don't feel capable of it. And so that was kind of the real like turning point mentally, where I understood that even on the days where I don't feel capable, I actually am just as capable as the day before that. It's just that it feels different physically. So I might wake up in the morning and feel panicked and feel anxious, but that literally doesn't mean anything in terms of what I am able to achieve that day. Like, I am still able to do everything that I could do on a day when I felt capable and didn't feel anxious. It's just that I'm going to feel a little bit gnarly to begin with. That trip was how I learnt not to push myself. And I think that's where a lot of people trip up when it comes to agoraphobia, is they think that like, I'm going to have to really push myself to get out of the house. And you kind of do, in the sense that you are going to have to feel discomfort. You are going to have to feel your way through panic and anxiety, but not in the sense that you have to grit your teeth and you have to try and ignore what's happening in your body for the sake of getting through. I think the difference is that it's not so much you're ignoring and you're trying to like white knuckle your way through. It's more that you are opening to all those uncomfortable feelings, and that, that possibility for me of like, what if I humiliate myself? I had to open to that, and I had to soften to that. Instead of trying to pretend that it wasn't there and trying to get through my day regardless, I had to talk about the fact that that was there. I had to, say it out loud sometimes. I had to say to people, like, I am feeling panicked and I'm scared that I'm gonna embarrass myself in some way. And just like acknowledging that that was the way I felt and allowing that to be okay, rather than trying to push through it. I hope that subtle difference makes sense, because it's sometimes still something that I struggle with, trying to go like, okay, right now I am pushing and I don't need to. Right now I more need to just relax and like let my body do what it wants to do without trying to change it or repress it or suppress it. Yeah, that was a big learning curve. To recap, the things that really helped me the most: going out for walks, talking about the way that I felt, connecting with people over the way I felt, building a community of people, or like immersing myself in a community of people who experienced the same things that I did, and people who got it and people who understood. But I guess I want to also point out that not in the way that I think sometimes you can kind of join a community and sort of bathe in misery about things. You can talk about incessantly about how hard things are and how impossible it all is, and it's kind of like you're getting validation about how awful everything is with that community. I think the important thing with community is that it needs to be a place where you feel like you can be yourself and you can say when things are hard and when you're struggling. You need to have the space to be able to do that, but I think you also need to be there to lift people up too. Like, sometimes people need a shoulder to cry on, and sometimes they need someone to hold their hand and say, let's do this together. Like, you've got this, let's go. going to the gym, going to like groups in person, not support groups. I wish I had done that, but I didn't. I was scared. But going to things like mothers groups and play groups and community groups with my kid, kind of immersing myself in the world again, meeting new people, telling those people about what I was going through and how panic was hard for me and how it manifested for me, and again, being open about what I was going through. Tapping into kind of creativity, so writing, when I did blog posts and making videos and that kind of thing, like giving my anxiety a creative outlet was really helpful. And saying yes was a massive one. Finally starting to say yes to things instead of always saying no and being angry that I was even asked. Like, how dare these people ask me to do something? Don't they understand how fucking hard it is for me and how I can't leave the house? Like, why would they invite me to their, baby shower or to their wedding when they know that I can't leave? Like, even just saying that, I hear how silly it sounds. But at the time, when I would receive these invitations, I'd be like, why do they invite me when they know that I can't go? When I finally started saying yes, yes, I will come to that. Yes, I would love to, come watch you get married. Yes, I would love to come to your baby shower. Yes, I would love to come to your birthday party. And I'll figure out the anxiety. But I want to be able to do those things, and I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to show up to the best of my ability, at least. That was a big one. So instead of saying no to things and looking for the cure in order to be able to say yes, like, maybe if I found the right medication or I did the right therapy, then I would be able to say yes to things finally. But realizing that I needed to say yes first, and then I would start to feel better. That was a big difference. I hope this video was helpful. I hope I didn't ramble too much. Lastly, if there's one thing that I can leave you with, it's that I know how hard it feels. I know how insurmountable it feels. I know how impossible it feels, but it's really not. It's really not impossible. It might not look the way you think it's going to look, but it's going to be much better than you could have ever imagined. You are going to find things out about yourself that you didn't expect to find out. You are going to learn new things about yourself. You are going to learn what you're really capable of. And you are going to grow into who you are meant to be in the most beautiful, crazy way. Yeah. And if you had never dealt with agoraphobia, if you'd never dealt with panic attacks, you wouldn't grow to become the fullest version of who you're here to be. I honestly believe that. Hope you're having a great day. Take care.